You understand these negotiations very well. The president says no need to rush. Is he right?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's very important that the president address the structural issues within the Chinese economy that are impeding American exports and investment. And therefore, he's right. It's better to do this thoroughly rather than to do it quickly.
Well, fair enough, but is the best way to do that then to impose deadlines such as he did as of midnight last night, if it's going to take a long time anyway?
The trade negotiators have probably been working all night, and I'm sure that they're working now. They're both very able, very experienced, and I'm hopeful that over the course of the day, or perhaps into the weekend, they may be able to reach some compromises. Let's take a deep breath. No imports into the United States or exports from the United States have been affected yet. That will take approximately 3 weeks. Until the first shipments arrive from China by boat.
So, Craig, certainly you're seeing in markets that people are taking a deep breath. There is not a mass exodus or hysteria in U.S. equities that we can perceive, or globally for that matter. So, Craig, I'm just wondering, what are you looking for when it comes to the Chinese response to the U.S. tariffs to indicate whether we're moving more toward a conciliatory approach or whether we're moving further apart when it comes to U.S.-Chinese relations?
Thanks, Lisa. I think that there are a couple of really key things to look for. One is state-owned enterprises. What will come out of these negotiations with regard to the preferential policies given to Chinese state-owned enterprises? A second is subsidies. And at a bare minimum, the Chinese should live up to their WTO commitments on subsidies. A third is intellectual property rights and forced technology transfer. The Chinese, again, need to protect foreigners' intellectual property rights in a more thorough manner. A fourth area is industrial policy, and the Chinese, again, need to come into the same types of measures that other countries take on industrial policies and not force through policies that are aimed at making China dominant in the industries in the future. It's not too much to ask.
So, Craig, even as you were speaking, we had a viewer write in and say which of the products are affected. We just put that up on the screen. If we could put that up again so people can see exactly what is being affected by the increase in the tariffs to 25%. But one of the questions for me is, how did we get to this point? Because it may be relevant to whether we can get out of the jam, and that is this. Apparently, we thought we had something of a deal with the Chinese to deal with some of the major issues you've identified. They went back home and they came back with a draft that said, sorry, we can't do that. Is it possible that reflects a more fundamental structural problem with China, that they don't feel, politically or otherwise, they can give the United States what it needs on things like technology transfer, intellectual property?
I think that there are two ways to look at that. From a technical perspective, it's difficult to take an agreement in abstract and turn it into Chinese law. Let's not underestimate the complexity of that. At the same time, there are certainly parties in China that would be reluctant to make the commitments that it appears Vice Premier Liu has made verbally. So China has politics too. And there is no doubt that there are special interest groups in China that would love to block this. The important thing to keep in mind is that it is in the interest of the Chinese people and the Chinese economy to progress with economic reform, to open up their economy to both domestic investment and foreign investment, to make their economy more competitive. And this is a wonderful opportunity both for China and the United States, and indeed the world, to set right some of the obstacles that have been in place for too long.
Craig, I have to wonder the political aspect of this from the U.S. front. Is China looking at President Trump and saying he may be easier to deal with than any potential Democratic successor that comes in 2020, so we should get a deal done now? Or are they waiting this out for President Trump to possibly no longer be in office before stepping in and trying to actually solidify a deal?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think that the Chinese are agnostic on Democrat or Republican. They know that there's going to be tension and conflict either way. And so they realize that President Trump will be the U.S. president for at least the next 2 years, possibly the next 6 years. I think the president is committed to doing a deal. President Xi is also committed to doing a deal. So now it's the time to do that. The Chinese are not going to, they're too smart to get into a guessing game and play partisan politics in the United States. There's no percentage in it for them. And so I suspect that they're looking at this and negotiating as hard as they can for the best deal that they could get.
So, Craig, finally, to sort of wrap this up, to ask the simple question, who needs this deal more, the Chinese and the United States? And a second part of that question, do they know it?
Well, both sides are hurting. We recently completed a survey of U.S. exports. The entire center part of the country, the entire agricultural sector of the United States is hurting. A lot of manufacturers are hurting. In China, a lot of people are hurting. So therefore, we both need this agreement. I would say over the shorter term, the U.S. economy looks great. Over the longer term, the Chinese economy is very strong. Do not underestimate the Chinese economy. They will produce 30% of global growth for the next 10 years, and American companies need to be a part of that growth story. If American companies are not leaders in China, they cannot be global leaders. This is an important market. We must settle these differences as soon as possible.